Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I do apologize for it being late, but as I posted on Twitter earlier today, I was at UFC X, the fan fest this weekend down in Las Vegas, so I was very busy this weekend. I did not get a chance to record the show until a little bit later than I usually do. But hopefully it's not out too late for you guys. I hope I didn't mess anything up, didn't mess up any of your guys' day. But I do want to take a second to talk about UFC X because it was an absolutely phenomenal experience. I've never experienced anything like that. It was so much fun. Got to interact, got to meet so many fighters, and every single person that I interacted with was such a down-to-earth, such a cool person. I mean, you talk about Valentina Shevchenko. If you saw the picture, it was just a selfie, me, my dad, and Valentina, because she actually waited after she was done with her scheduled meet and greet to sign some stuff for some fans, to take pictures. She was super down-to-earth. She was super cool. And even the fighters on social media were interactive with you. I mean, I had 5 different fighters, including 2 champions in Carla Esparza and Davidson Figueiredo, like my posts on Instagram that they were involved in. I also had Andrei Arlovski, former heavyweight champion. He liked my post with him and put it on a story. Same with Rob Font. And there was one other person, Justin Gaethje from day one. He also liked my post. I posted that on my story just because I thought that was so cool. How these guys are so big, guys and girls are so big, but yet they're so happy to interact with all the fans and interact with them afterwards on social media and everything. So cool to see such a big turnout from the MMA community. Because, I mean, it was packed. There was some people that I really, really wanted to meet that I didn't get a chance to. Charles Oliveira, I was unable to meet, unfortunately, just because every time he was doing a meet and greet or an autograph signing, the lines were just crazy. I didn't get a chance to meet him. Henry Cejudo, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. There was a few others that I wish I could have met that I wasn't able to. But at the end of the day, it was a very fun experience. I got to meet a lot of fighters that were on a bucket list for me, including Valentina Shevchenko, Carla Esparza, Justin Gaethje. There's many, many more that I'm missing. Michael Chiesa, as I'm from Washington, and he's on the other side of the state from me, but he does train out of Spokane. So that was really cool to meet more of a local guy in Chiesa. So very, very fun experience. I hope to do this for years to come. Special shout out to my dad for going with me. It was a lot of fun hanging out with him, meeting all the UFC fighters. But that's enough of that because we have a lot to talk about. PFL rounded up their second round of fights and got their last 2 weight classes done, have their full playoffs set. Also, UFC 276 was absolute bonkers, so we have to go into that. Plus, I have my predictions for UFC Fight Night, the Battle of the Rafaels. Rafael dos Anjos, the former lightweight champion, takes on young up-and-coming prospect Rafael Fiziev. So that'll be very exciting. But I do want to start off with the PFL. The women's lightweight division and the welterweights were able to get their playoffs set for this. For about a month and a half from now will be the women's lightweight and the welterweights. I believe August 5th will be the first round of playoff matchups. But starting off in the women's lightweight division, coming in first place with 12 points as she got 2 first-round finishes with TKO victories over Zamzago Faizalanova. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. That name is impossible to say. And then Gina Fabian on this most recent fight card. So 2 first-round finishes, 2 first-round KOs. She gets 12 points. Very, very impressive for Pacheco. Coming in second is the reigning champ, Kayla Harrison. Arguably the baddest woman on the planet right now. She comes in with 9 points after a decision victory over Marina Maknakina and a first round TKO victory over Caitlin Young in the most recent fight. Also with 9 points, third place, Martina Jindrova with a decision victory over Vanessa Melo and a first-round TKO victory over, again, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this name, Zemzago Faizalanova. I'm sorry, I'm trying my best to say this name, but it's pretty tough. And then rounding it out in fourth place is Olena Koleshnik with 6 points after 2 decision victories over Abigail Montes and Vanessa Melo. So that will lead to the matchups in the women's lightweight division. Number 1 seed Larissa Pacheco versus Olena Koleshnik. And then the 2 versus 3 is Kayla Harrison and Martina Jindrova. So really, really looking forward to those fights coming. I believe that one's on August 20th. Then we have the welterweights. The welterweights in first place, we have the UFC veteran Rory McDonald. He got a first-round submission victory but in his first fight, but did lose his second fight to who's in second place, Sadabo Sai. Sadabo Sai is coming in second after 2 decision victories, like I said, over Rory McDonald and then Nikolai Aleksakin. Sorry, these are brutal names to say, and I'm trying my best here. But so Sabado Sai comes in with second place. Third place is Carlos Leal after also getting 2 decision victories over Chris Brown, and then he also got a decision victory over the reigning champ Ray Cooper. And then rounding it out in fourth place, Magomed Umalatov, who actually only had 1 fight, but that's all it took because he got the first round finish over Jara Al-Sawali. So that will lead to the UFC veteran Rory McDonald, number 1 seed, facing on 4 seed Magomed Umalatov, and then Sadabo Sai versus Carlos Leal in the 2 versus 3 matchup. So very exciting things coming. Like I said, this is rounding out the playoffs, so we do have about a month off until the next set of fights coming. Like I said, I believe it's August 5th, and that will be the lightweights and the light heavyweights, I believe, will be squaring off in their semifinal matchups. So really, really looking forward to that. But for now, we really only got UFC for a couple weeks, so looking forward to that too. Now we go into UFC 276. Like I said, this was such a great pay-per-view. I know a lot of people weren't very happy about the main event, but I'm going to go into that a little bit later because I'm not as mad about it as other people are. But to start it out, we started off hot with a 42-second finish. Jessica Rose Clark took on Yulia Stoliarenko. It was a very big win for Stoliarenko. She was able to sink in the armbar victory. If you're faint of heart, or if you don't like broken bones, I recommend not watching this fight if you haven't watched it yet, as it looked like Jessica Rose Clark's arm did snap in that armbar. So that was a little gross. But nonetheless, Stoliarenko did get a huge win. This is her first win in her 5th UFC fight. So her back was really, really against the wall in this fight. I predicted Jessica Rose Clark to win. But nonetheless, congratulations to Yulia Stoliarenko to maybe save her chance at staying in the UFC and getting another chance at redemption. And then that leads to Jessica Eye versus Macy Barber. Jessica Eye did end up retiring, I believe, at the end of this fight. So congratulations to her. Great career, former title contender at this flyweight division. She had a great career when it comes to women's MMA. But nonetheless, this fight in particular was really fun. It was very back and forth. Macy Barber is an absolute beast, and she is going to be a problem in this division for years to come, as she is only 24 years old and she's beaten veterans like Jessica Eye. She came out great in that first round. She was getting good work in the clinch. She was landing these nasty elbows and big strikes that whole first round in the clinch. Second round, though, Jessica Eye took advantage of Macy Barber going into that clinch, as Jessica Eye is an amazing grappler. She kept on getting it back to the ground, getting control, and controlling Macy Barber for a majority of that round. And probably, I believe she actually did take that second round in all three judges' eyes with the grappling. And then in between rounds 2 and 3, Macy Barber's coaches did a perfect job telling her, just go away from the clinch. We don't want to see you clinch at all unless it's trying to get out of the clinch if Jessica Eye were to grapple. And she did exactly that. Macy Barber had a phenomenal third round, keeping her distance, not getting in too close. And when she did get in close and Jessica Eye was able to grab a hold of her, Macy Barber was able to overpower her, get her off of her, and not stay in that clinch position where she could possibly get taken down. Barber was able to land some big strikes. She was able to take the first and the third round in all three judges' eyes, getting the decision victory over a former title contender, like I said earlier, and a top 10 contender. So this should jump her up quite a bit in the rankings. I'm assuming she'll be around the 10 or 11 range, so about 2 or 3 ranking spots. And then rounding out the early prelims, Uriah Hall versus Andre Muniz. This was a fairly dominant victory for Andre Muniz, as he was able to get the takedown against Uriah Hall in all 3 rounds and basically control him all 3 rounds, almost all 15 minutes. I didn't like that he was just going for the armbar, and that was basically all he was going for, because especially in that third round, he had Uriah Hall's back for over half that round, and he didn't even attempt a rear naked choke once. Uriah Hall is one of the hardest people to submit. Uriah Hall's never been submitted in his MMA career. Not just UFC, his entire MMA career he hasn't been submitted. And you're chasing one submission. I didn't like that aspect of Muniz's game, but nonetheless, he was still dominant in this fight. He still dominated a great fighter in Uriah Hall, a top 10 contender in Uriah Hall. So just like Macy Barber, I could definitely see Andre Muniz maybe sneaking into that top 10 of that division. Probably more likely for Muniz, I see him going to maybe 11, just because, yeah, he was dominant, but he didn't show enough to really jump more than 2 people in that weight class. So I definitely see Andre Muniz getting about the 10 or 11 range, more likely 11 in my eyes. But big win nonetheless for Muniz over a top 10 contender. That leads us to one of my favorite fights of the night, Brad Tavares versus Dricus Duplessis. This was so much fun. Dricus came out insanely hot. He was throwing bombs left and right, just going for gold that entire first round. It did eventually catch up to him. You could see he got really tired coming into that second round, where Brad Tavares was actually able to catch up a little bit. Brad Tavares was landing some good strikes, maybe coming back a little bit, But then Duplicitous was able to change his whole game plan. It seemed like something clicked where he was too tired to go at the high volume that he was trying to go to that whole fight, and then he was able to slow it down, pick his shots, and then he just started picking apart Brad Tavares. He was able to get a big decision victory over a ranked middleweight. I definitely could see Duplicitous jumping into those rankings, because the whole rankings in the middleweight division, there was a lot of ranked middleweights that fought on this card, and a lot of them are going to switch around because some of them lost, some of them won. I mean, obviously, Alex Pereira is going to be jumping into those rankings also, so maybe not quite yet will Duplicitous jump in, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he did jump into those rankings after a decisive victory over Brad Tavares like that. Next up was Ian Garry versus Gabriel Greene. Another absolutely phenomenal performance by the undefeated Irishman, Ian Garry. I will give Gabriel Greene credit, though. He did look fairly good in this fight. I thought he was going to be trying to go for the takedown too much to really have a chance, but his striking actually looked really good in this fight. He showed a lot of improvements in the striking, did Gabriel Greene, but at the same time, Garry won this fight pretty clearly. He even secured a takedown in the meantime. And I definitely would not expect Ian Garry to be going for a takedown, especially against a guy like Gabriel Greene. But I definitely, with that performance, that was a very, very good performance by Ian Garry. I would not be shocked at all to see a low-ranked opponent in his future. And the next, he probably will have one more fight against an unranked guy, and then after that, so in the next two fights, I could definitely see a ranked opponent coming Ian Garry's way very, very soon. And then next up, two legends went head-to-head, Jim Miller versus Cowboy Donald Cerrone. It was so much fun to watch these two go at it. The timeless wonder, Jim Miller, man, holy freaking crap. That guy, for how many fights he's been in, for all the ups and downs in his career. There was a point where Jim Miller lost 4 straight, and he had lost 8 of his last 12. And to revitalize his career so late in his career is so cool to watch. I can't wait to see what Cowboy does, though. After this fight, he did retire. As much as it sucks seeing a legend like that go, I do think it was the right call. I do think it was the right move. Like he said in the post-fight interview, he just doesn't have the love for it anymore. I totally respect that. And plus, it looks like he does have a career in acting after this. He did a movie not too long ago, so I definitely would love to see him keep going with that, because I was listening to the John Anik and Kenny Florian podcast, and they were talking about how a lot of fighters will stay in the fight game just because they have nothing else to do after that. So it is good to see Cowboy Donald Cerrone seeing that he just doesn't have the love for MMA anymore, but he has the outlet. He can go into acting and make a career out of that, and be maybe even more successful in acting than he was in the UFC. So congratulations to both guys. Congratulations to Jim Miller for the win and becoming the sole record holder for the most wins in UFC history. And congratulations on retirement for Cowboy Donald Cerrone. And then that leads us to the premier prelim of the night, Brad Riddell versus Jalen Turner. Another very short fight, but absolutely ginormous win for Jalen Turner. This, I believe, will be his 5th or 6th straight victory. And first over a ranked opponent. That is so huge. I fully expect Jalen Turner to be ranked after that performance, getting the guillotine choke in under a minute, and victory over the ranked opponent and Brad Riddell. So congratulations. Big win for Jalen Turner. That leads us to the main card that did start off kind of, I don't know what word to describe it as. It sucks how this fight had to end. Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley. Unfortunately, this fight did end in a no contest, as Sean O'Malley did accidentally. It was very much an accidental eye poke and ended up injuring the eye of Pedro Munoz to the point where Pedro Munoz couldn't even open his eye. I heard they had to give him some like numbing eye drops just to even take a look at his eye, because it basically just seized up and he couldn't open that eye. A lot of people, including myself, I'll fully admit, thought that he definitely called it too early. He like basically didn't even want to try. But coming to find out that there was a legitimate injury to his eye, I didn't post anything about it, but I definitely thought it and was talking to people around me about how I didn't really like that. But when you got a legit eye injury, there's nothing we can really do. But in the little fight that we did get to see, we saw actually a very close fight. Munoz actually performed a lot better than what I thought he was going to, because he came out with a very good game plan. He usually is a very much in-your-face type of fighter, which really does not contrast well against Sean O'Malley, as Sean O'Malley is a counter striker. So I wasn't sure how that was going to work, but Munoz came out, had a great game plan, was using those leg kicks very, very good. But the worst part on the side of Sean O'Malley is Sean O'Malley seemed to be just getting comfortable. He was starting to land bigger strikes, and then the eye poke happened. We couldn't get the fight to continue, unfortunately. I'm not sure what they're going to do with this fight. They might reschedule it, or they might just move on, have Sean O'Malley face someone else, and Pedro Munoz, for that matter, face someone else. But it was a fun fight for a while it lasted. It sucks to see a fight end like that, though. But a fight that did not suck whatsoever. Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barberena. These two UFC veterans went to absolute war. The chin, the heart of Brian Barberena is absolutely ridiculous. 99% of welterweights would have been KO'd in the first round against Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler looked phenomenal in that first round and was landing bombs left and right. But Barberena just took it. He took every single one of them. And then also the output, the offense of Brian, he threw over 300 strikes in under 10 minutes. And never slowed down. He just kept going. He was throwing unorthodox elbows. He was throwing weird strikes the whole fight. And then eventually he was able to get the TKO victory over an absolute legend in Robbie Lawler, the former welterweight champion. So huge, ginormous win for Brian Barberena, and that makes it 2 in a row with his win earlier this year over Matt Brown and now Robbie Lawler. I heard that his corner actually walked by Santiago Ponzinibbio, who was actually doing the Spanish broadcast that night, and called him out, which I think would be a phenomenal fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio and Brian Barberena. Ponzinibbio just falling out of the rankings after his last loss to Michel Pereira. But then Brian Barberena, 2 straight wins against Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler. I think that's a fantastic matchup, and I would definitely love to see those two go at it. And then next up, we do have Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira proved any doubters that he had wrong in this fight. I mean, it was a pretty short fight. It ended in the first round. Alex Pereira is just an absolute monster. He's just insane. The amount of skill that guy has is just absolutely ridiculous. Huge props to Sean Strickland, though, for even taking this fight. Sean Strickland was he was a top 5 middleweight contender, and he took a fight against an unranked guy that the UFC was trying to push. He had nothing. Sean Strickland had absolutely nothing to gain from taking this fight, and he still took it nonetheless. Huge props to him, but also Alex Pereira. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. Sean Strickland went in with a game plan to strike, to try to kickbox with Alex Pereira. It wasn't going to work. And Alex Pereira showed why it wasn't going to work. He ended up getting the TKO victory. And now he just lined himself up for the rematch, the MMA first-time match between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. We all know the history there in the kickboxing world. So huge props to Alex Pereira. I'm very, very excited to see him and Izzy go at it whenever that fight comes around. And that leads to the co-main event, the first of our title fights. Alexander Volkanovski, the featherweight champ, had a flawless performance against Max Holloway. And a flawless performance against, I should say, an all-time great in Max Holloway. He was a step ahead of Max Holloway the entire fight. It was absolutely unreal. I never thought I would see anything like that. No one's supposed to beat Max Holloway like that. And Alexander Volkanovski, after both of the first 2 fights were so close, and Max Holloway was coming in, he was fired up for this third fight. And just unbelievable what Alexander Volkanovski did in this fight. He shut the door on that story of his career because there was all those questions, because the first 2 fights were just neck and neck. They were so close. And then to 50-45 Max Holloway, all 3 judges gave him a 50-45. Just an absolute amazing performance. I can't wait to see what Volk does next. There's a lot of rumors. He even said it himself. He wants to move up to lightweight to challenge to become a double champ in the lightweight and featherweight division. But if he decides, or if the UFC doesn't want that, UFC wants him to stay at featherweight, he stays at featherweight. I also wouldn't mind the fight against Josh Emmett. I think that would also be a very, very fun fight. But nonetheless, Alexander Volkanovski showed his greatness in this fight by cementing his legacy, by cementing himself as the greatest featherweight to ever be in the UFC. That leads to the main event. Israel Adesanya took on Jared Cannonier. Izzy did win this fight by decision. It was not the most exciting fight. I will admit that. It was not exciting, especially if you're a casual fan. But I think it's tough because Israel Adesanya is just a phenomenal striker. He is an amazing striker to the point where he's not going to strike unless he sees an opportunity, a hole where he can land a strike. And if you're just a casual MMA fan, if you're looking for the big knockout or the crazy submission, you're going to hate when Israel Adesanya fights. And I get a lot of people are upset at the fact that he was talking about, you're going to see something you've never seen from me before. So it sounded like he was going to be more aggressive. He was going to be more in Jared Cannonier's face. And he wasn't. So from that perspective, I get why people were upset. but I don't know why people still expect that from Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya is a counter striker. He's going to wait for you to come to him, and when you mess up, he's going to capitalize on it. That comes to Jared Cannonier, though. Jared Cannonier was not anywhere near aggressive enough in this fight. He was going for takedowns. There was no reason for him to go for takedowns. Should he have gotten in the clinch, gotten it really close where Israel couldn't use that length? 100%. And especially in that 5th round, Jared Cannonier should have just gone berserk. I get it, fatigue probably had a lot to do with it, but in that 5th round, you clearly were losing that fight. There was no way you were winning that fight by decision. Izzy had at least 3 of the rounds, and I believe at least one of the judges gave all 5 to Izzy. So at that point, you have to just go. You have to let loose and just fight and try to get a finish on Izzy Adesanya. He didn't do that. Israel defends his title once again and cements his legacy even more. I mean, this guy is probably the 2nd best middleweight of all time behind Anderson Silva, and he proved it in this fight. I know it's not the most exciting, and a lot of fans don't like his style, but when it works, why change anything? So I still give props to Izzy. I still like Izzy just because of his skill. I know, I get it, he's not the most exciting. A lot of people don't like him. But nonetheless, I still do, and congratulations to him for defending his title once again. But that is all that happened this last Saturday for UFC 276. Now let's get into some fight predictions. First fight of the night, Ronnie Lawrence versus Saeed Cockromanov. I hope I said that right. I just tried to look up how to say it. It's a very difficult name, so I apologize in advance. But this is a very intriguing grapplers matchup starting off the card. Though they are grapplers, they do have contrasting styles in that grappling game. Ronnie Lawrence doesn't have any submission victories in his career. He takes people down all the time, but has 0 submission victories in his career, but does have quite a bit of ground and pound victories. So he is very much in your face, get the big punches on the ground, where Cockromanov, on the other hand, is more of an all-around guy, but does have a bit more submissions in his game. Neither guy has lost in the UFC. Lawrence winning his first 3, including a Contender Series bout. Cockromanov only does have the 1 fight in the UFC, but he did get the victory, even though he did miss weight for that fight. I think this is a very interesting fight. I think it's a very close fight. But I'm going to go with Cockromanov just because of the well-roundedness. I don't think ground and pounders work very well against jiu-jitsu guys. So I think he's going to get caught up. And there's going to be a lot of scrambles. And I think Cockromanov is going to get the upper hand in those scrambles. And I'm going to go with Cockromanov by decision. Next up, we have a pair of kind of struggling light heavyweights, Kennedy and Nzechukwu, taking on Carl Roberson. Nzechukwu has lost his last 2, and Carl Roberson has lost his last 3. So like I said, 2 guys coming in struggling very, very much. These guys do have contrasting styles, though. Kennedy is much more of a striker, where Carl Roberson is definitely more of a grappler. Also, I will say Carl Roberson may have lost his last 3, but I mean, these are very, very high-level fighters. We're talking Marvin Vettori, a top 5 middleweight. We're talking Brendan Allen, a great grappler. And we're talking Khalil Roundtree, a veteran of the UFC, who can really beat anyone on any given night if his game is on that night. I do like Kennedy's takedown defense, though. He has an 80% takedown defense and is just incredibly powerful. I think this fight is going to be over very, very quickly. I'm going Nzechukwu. There we go. Nzechukwu by first round KO. That leads to Cody Brundage versus Tresean Gore, another matchup of two good grapplers. Brundage does bring in a very good jiu-jitsu game, and so does Tresean Gore, but he seems to be more of just an overall fighter. He has the grappling where he can just get you at the ground and pound. He also has a decent stand-up game. Cody Brundage is coming off of his first UFC win earlier this year in March after losing his debut, where the Ultimate Fighter veteran Tresean Gore, who was actually supposed to be in the finals but had to pull out due to injury, ended up facing the guy he was supposed to face in the Ultimate Fighter finale Bryan battle and did end up losing that fight. So he will be looking for his first UFC win. I look at Tresean Gore to be in the more dominant positions, though, as he has an 87% takedown defense. And Cody Brundage only lands about a quarter of the takedowns that he attempts. So I'm going to go with Tresean Gore here by decision. Next up, we have Antonia Shevchenko versus Courtney Casey, two veteran flyweights going head-to-head. Both ladies have had up and downs in their careers, but for the most part, both are strikers. They do have decent ground games to go along with it. Both have faced very, very tough competition in the UFC. So, I mean, yeah, they have been up and down, but at the same time, they are facing very, very tough fighters. Courtney Casey is coming off of a win, while Shevchenko has dropped her last two. Granted, that is to Andrea Lee, a top 10 contender, and Casey O'Neill, one of the better up-and-coming flyweights in that division. I look to Shevchenko to bounce back, though. As you know, I mean, the name kind of gives it away. She is the younger sister of the number one pound-for-pound female on the planet, Valentina Shevchenko. So she does have that going for her. She does have Valentina in her corner. I don't know if actually like in her corner, but she trains with Valentina quite a bit. I'm going with Shevchenko being able to bounce back and get this win by decision. Next up, we have Amin Zahabi versus Ricky Turcios, a battle in the bantamweight division. Ayman has been fairly inactive as of recent, with only one fight in the last 3 years, and that came about a year and a half ago. Turcios coming in after winning the Ultimate Fighter Season 28 in the bantamweight division. So this will be it's not UFC debut because he does have the Ultimate Fighter victory, but first UFC fight outside of the Ultimate Fighter. Zahabi is definitely more of a striker, but does have a bit of a ground game if it comes to that, which it probably will, because Ricky Turcios does like to use his wrestling and can at times not be the most exciting fighter. He can sometimes be a little bit of the lay and pray type. But nonetheless, he is a very good wrestler. So, I mean, it could definitely go to the ground. I'm looking for Ayman, though, to have more success in this fight. I just think he's going to be more aggressive. And I think he's going to be able to land a big strike in the second round and get a TKO victory. That leads us to the premier prelim of the night, Cynthia Calvillo versus Nina Nunes, a fight between two top 10 fighters in their respective divisions, as Nina Nunes is moving up from the strawweight division. Both ladies are trying to get back on the winning side of things, as Nina Nunes has been inactive, as she did have a child recently. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense why she wouldn't be fighting as much. With only one fight in the last 3 years, and it was a loss to Mackenzie Dern. Cynthia Calvillo has dropped her last three. Granted, that is against Katlyn Chookagian, Jessica Andrade, and Andrea Lee. So both of these ladies have been facing insanely talented competition. Granted, they haven't had much success with that talented competition, but it still can't be easy to be losing all these fights. This is a very tough fight to call, but I think Calvillo's just been more active. I think she's more of the natural flyweight. So I'm going to go with Cynthia Calvillo by decision. That leads to the first fight of the main card. Michael Johnson, the veteran striker, takes on Jamie Mullarkey. Michael Johnson coming in after snapping a 4-fight losing streak earlier this year to Alan Patrick. He did take over a year off, which did seem to bode well for him as he was struggling with the 4 straight losses, but he was also just incredibly active. He was fighting all the time, so it was good to see him take that year off, and it seemed to work for him as he was able to get a victory again. Jamie Mullarkey is coming off of a loss to Jalen Turner, who, like I said earlier, I was praising him a ton and saying he probably will have a ranking soon. So, I mean, take that how you want to. Jamie Mullarkey, though, is a very talented grappler and has very good ground and pound, but also does have a good stand-up game to go along with it. I think he will most likely have to use that stand-up, as Michael Johnson has a history of not getting taken down. Michael Johnson has tremendous takedown defense and has just faced so many great grapplers in his extended career. But I am looking for Jamie Mullarkey to have more success with the threat of the takedown. I think he's going to be able to land some strikes trying to feint the takedown. Michael Johnson goes to defend that. He lands a strike. I think Jamie Mullarkey is just going to have more success in this fight and get the decision victory. That leads to Jared Vanderaa versus Chase Sherman, 2 heavyweights with their backs against the wall, to say the least. Vanderaa has dropped his last 3. Chase Sherman has dropped his last 4. I could really see this being the last shot for either of these guys. They are both strikers primarily. This is a very hard fight to pick, but I think Vanderaa is just a little bit better. So I'm going to go with Vanderaa by second round submission, or second round TKO. Sorry, he's not going to submit anybody. Next up, a matchup in the middleweight division. Jamie Pickett takes on Denis Tiuliulin. 2 strikers, both coming in off of losses. I think this is a really great matchup for both of these guys because they both seem to struggle against great grapplers. So with both of them being primarily strikers, I think it will definitely be a good matchup for both. Jamie Pickett does have a little bit more of the UFC experience. I look to see him take advantage of that. This is a very, very close fight to call, but I am going to go Jamie Pickett by decision in this one. That leads to Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Said Nurmagomedov. 2 guys that have been around the fight game for quite a long time, especially de Andrade. And really have had quite a bit of success in the UFC. I believe that both of them have been kind of inactive lately, so they just haven't gotten the publicity that a lot of other fighters would get because they haven't fought just back to back 2-3 times a year for a while. De Andrade is insanely tough and does not get finished very often. So I definitely could see this fight going to decision, but also he is 37 years old. So I do think he may, I don't want to say lose a step because we don't know that yet, but he might be a little bit step behind Said Nurmagomedov. So I'm going to go with Said by decision in this fight. That leads to the co-main event of the evening, Caio Borralho versus Armen Petrosyan. 2 guys coming off wins in their UFC debut, going straight to the big stage of a co-main event on this card. Armin Petrosyan, very much a great striker with a ton of power and a huge win earlier this year in his debut over Gregory Rodriguez. Brojalio is a great grappler on the other hand, and will definitely try to neutralize the power of Armin by getting this fight to the ground. I'm going to have to side with Caio, though, because Petrosyan does not have the best takedown defense. I think he's really going to struggle against Brojalio, and once he does, he's going to lose a lot of energy quick because grapplers do destroy gas tanks on a lot of fighters. I think that's going to happen in this fight. I'm going Caio by second round submission, and that leads to the main event of the evening. RDA Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev, the former lightweight champion. RDA, UFC legend, takes on one of the best Muay Thai practitioners and up-and-comer, Rafael Fiziev. This is actually the third time this fight was supposed to happen, as Fiziev had visa issues the first time, and then when the second time it was going to happen, he tested positive for COVID earlier in the week before the fight. So unfortunately, or hopefully, this fight happens this time around, because I've been looking forward to this fight for a long time. RDA has found success again since moving down, back down to lightweight, where he was the champion before winning 2 straight fights. Fiziev did lose his UFC debut, but since then has rattled off 5 straight wins, including Mark Diakasi, Bobby Greene, and Brad Riddell. I do think a lot of people are overlooking RDA, though, because of his age, but RDA is an absolute grinder. He has unlimited gas. He's an amazing grappler. So I don't think people are giving enough respect to RDA, but at the same time, that's not giving me enough motivation to pick him. I think Rafael Fiziev is the real deal. He's absolutely amazing. Every time I watch one of his fights and I see him use those kicks and just the smack, no matter how, it doesn't even seem like he's kicking that hard, and the smack and the echo that comes off of these kicks is just insane. I'm going with Rafael Fiziev by third round TKO and continues his climb up the lightweight rankings. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for listening. Next week, we have a bit of a break from PFL. We have no Bellator either next week. So it's going to be a mostly, or probably most likely, all UFC show. Me giving my reaction to UFC Fight Night, Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. Plus, I will be giving my predictions for UFC Fight Night in Long Island next week. Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. Huge bout in the featherweight division. And that's a great card too. From top to bottom, that fight card is going to be awesome. So can't wait for that. But until then, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. See some of the fighters that I met this past weekend at UFC X there. And you can also find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Again, I know I say it every week, and it's probably getting annoying, but I don't care. Please comment on my videos, send me a DM, anything that you would like to know my opinions on in the world of MMA. I would love to give that to you, whether it be a reply to your comment or I add you to the show, and I could even give you a quick shout out if you want that to happen. But again, thank you all for listening. I'll try to be on time next week. Again, I do apologize that this show is coming on late, but thank you all for being patient with me. But until then, I will see you all next week at 5 p.m. Pacific time on Monday for Monday Night Fight Talk. Thank you all so much for listening.